So maybe just to start, how did you find your interest in data journalism? What drew you to this type of reporting?
I was a tech reporter many years ago, about a little more than 10 years ago. I was a tech reporter at the Montreal Gazette, and I got really interested in technology. I was covering a lot of tech startups and just got seduced by, the whole lingo, the possibilities. So I taught myself to code some HTML, JavaScript, because I wanted to do some interactive stuff, and realized I could tell a lot of powerful stories visually through data analysis and data visualization. And that's how I started.
And I was reading some of your articles on disparities between like different demographic data and COVID dashboards, like such as ethnicity. It seems like this could lead to like an unfair portrait of different areas of Canada. Like one area might have a ton of stories about long-term care facilities and senior citizens, and it might make it seem as though like that area has that's an especially bad problem in that area, whereas it's just not being reported elsewhere, or that data isn't being collected elsewhere. Do you think that independent fact-checking organizations or fact-checking applications could help shed light on this kind of thing, or help make the public more aware of how data might be being misrepresented?
Well, it could, right? It depends on the details, of course. Like if the problem is data accessibility or data transparency, I don't think anything could help. If the authorities aren't being proactively, releasing the data, if you have to like force it out of them with access to information laws, there's still a poverty of data there, which prevents anyone from knowing the true situation of what's happening.
So how do you think data journalism might impact fact-checking?
Well, I think data journalism can help with fact-checking. It can verify whether a claim is true or false based on the available data. If the data exists, of course. Some things just always remain he said, she said, but sometimes you can use stats and data analysis to see which side is telling the truth, or as close to the truth as you can get, because data isn't always like a perfect reflection of the world, right? Data can be biased, data can be incomplete. So I think in that sense, it can help, have a statistical sort of like bolster to get as closer to the facts as possible.
A lot of this practice is about like trust, like public trust in media. Mm-hmm. Why should the public trust the media?
Well, it shouldn't. It should always be should always keep them accountable and have a healthy dose of skepticism, like anything, right? I don't think trust is just has to be earned, not just given like by default. I think the public should trust maybe media organizations that have a good track record in being accurate, that shy away as much as possible from opinion and partisan reporting, and more for like, facts as much as possible. Sort of not necessarily a neutral position, because sometimes the facts are slanted to one side more than the other. But yeah.
Do you think that lack of public trust in media is a problem that needs to be addressed? Like, is there a crisis, or is it overblown?
There's definitely a crisis. It's a problem. It needs to be addressed. Media organizations need to talk about internally more. They need to communicate with the audiences more about how they arrive at their conclusions, how they do their reporting. There is a wonderful group in the US called the Trust in News Initiative, and they have an incredible newsletter with lots of good tips on how to increase trust with transparency. Media can no longer assume that, you know, oh, trust us, we're good at our jobs, we're thorough, we verify everything, right? You can't just say like, you know, yeah, believe us, we got this. You have to show your work.
Why do you think that there's that, or that's a problem, or that?
What, lack of trust?
Yeah.
Well, lots of issues. There's been, you know, there's the whole idea that, you know, for some communities, there's the idea that reporters, media organizations have a liberal bias, that they either stifle or like minimize conservative voices. That could be one. There have been issues in the past with media getting it wrong, right? Of in times of crisis, just believing what the government says or believing what the police says, right, and it being wrong. Later, it shows up that there was a cover up. There was, you know, there was lying. I'm thinking, you know, this is more American examples, but after September 11th, you know, like media organizations were like by default sided with, you know, reported whatever the government said without much scrutiny. I think it's also a problem of representation in media. So many newsrooms don't represent the populations they serve, right? It's mostly white, highly educated, middle class, suburban, and our society doesn't reflect our society. So there's a lack of representation, lack of like covering communities in an accurate way, right? I think those are some main reasons that come to mind.
What about like more serious forms of disinformation and media manipulation, like targeted attacks by foreign nations and stuff like that? How do you think that might be addressed?
Sorry, organized disinformation campaigns?
Yeah, like for example, in the US election or.
Okay, like on social media and Facebook and stuff like that?
Yeah.
How can that be addressed? That's the big question now, right? That's what a lot of people are asking. There's some experiments with platforms trying to, you know, deplatform the people who are really bad at it, right? Who are known to be to spread a lot of dangerous misinformation. And there's a whole debate about censorship with that, right? Free speech versus, you know, public safety. How can that be solved? I do think that news organizations need to take disinformation more seriously, to have dedicated disinformation groups like that monitor this stuff and react to it quickly before it becomes mainstream, before it blows up. I think that Radio Canada, they have a disinformation team that is incredible. I think they're a model. Jeff Yates and Nicolas De Rosa, they have a show called Decrypteur, which I think is like they do it right. BuzzFeed, I think, does it really, really well. So yeah, they need to like correct the record quickly and aggressively before the lie becomes too mainstream. That's it.
And what's your opinion of like independent fact-checking organizations? And do you have one that you use and why, like Snopes or PolitiFact or
Yeah, I mean they seem to be good. I don't think I don't have a preferred one. Those seem to be American ones. I don't cover American issues very much, but they do seem to be very good at what they do. There's PolitiFact, Snopes, like you said. I think there are a few that I've seen here and there. I forgot the names. I think they do a good, valuable service, especially when they document very well how they arrived at the conclusion that like that. No, this is wrong. This is partly true. This is misleading, and there's a record there on the web for people to consult.
I think that like hoaxes are so much more appealing to people than debunking hoaxes or debunking misinformation. Is there a way to make like that more popular or more shareable or more interesting? Or
Well, lies are just more interesting than the truth, right? They're edgy. They're scandalous. They're outrage inducing, right? Um, they trigger like a lizard brain kind of instinct to like to talk about it more than boring old facts. Like the truth is kind of dull, right? The truth is not really exciting. It's no, there is no cover up, there is no conspiracy. It's just like some people are just kind of incompetent, and that's is why this thing went wrong. Um, so, um, how do we make the facts more exciting, more shareable? That's a very good question. I don't know. Make it more quickly to digest. Use memes or social media in in a way that sets the record straight, but without dumbing it down. It's a hard challenge.
what do you think is the biggest threat to journalism technology-wise?
I think the biggest threat to journalism technology wise is the refusal by a lot of journalists to adopt technology, to adopt new tools. Journalism tends to be an incredibly small c conservative culture that is resistant to change until the last possible minute, until it becomes impossible to ignore. Um, um, Using new tools, new techniques to get information, to present information. I think it's just really been getting left behind. That's the biggest threat. I don't think that there is, all this talk about like AI, robots will write the news. Like, sure, they will for like really simple stuff, breaking news, sports scores, financial reports, right? Yeah, you can probably train an AI to do this, but like the human discernment, that I don't think. I think that'll be take a very long time for that to be automated.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think like journalism is so slow to adopt new technology or resistant to new technology?
I never understood it. I've worked in newsrooms for more than like 15 years now, and I just cannot understand why there's that resistance to change, to keep things as they were. This is how we've always done it in the past. It worked just fine. Um, I think maybe it's because a lot of journalists go into journalism because they weren't really good at math or good at science, right? Or good at like the technical skills. So, you know, they like to keep things simple and predictable and comfortable. I think that's a problem. But this is just my guess. I really don't have a good answer for that.
I think that stereotype is really true that people go into journalism because they're bad at math.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know how true it is, but people tell me this all the time when when I offer to work with a reporter with data and like, hey, great story on this issue. there's a lot of data on this. Let's collaborate and do something. Like, oh, I don't know, I'm bad at math. It's like, no, you're not. You think you are, but anyway, the machine will do the math for you. You don't have to do the math, right? Just learn a couple of Excel formulas and that's it. That's the most you'll have to, go out of your comfort zone. No, I don't know if it's true to stereotype, but it's something I just hear so much that it's become almost like lore,
Actually, first, I was going to ask, do you have any opinions on blockchain and journalism? And if so, what are your views on that?
Oh, I don't know enough. I know that there was one. I don't even know if they're still around. There was a startup that was trying to use blockchain in journalism. I think they're called Civil or something. I don't even know if they're around still. Like any new technology, it's probably still in the experimental stage. Other than using it for for cryptocurrencies, I'm not quite sure what. I don't personally know. I'm not quite informed what a lot of the applications are outside of that. I don't see. I can't imagine most newsrooms, most news leaders, most journalists um, experimenting with it in the near future, just because they don't understand it and because they like I said, why change? What we're doing is working just fine. Um, can it be used as a way to, verify that something is true? Maybe, but it's one thing to be able to perform it, right? Technically, to execute it technically. It's another whole thing to have people actually, believe it and adopt it and use it, right? Um, so my thoughts on it aren't very sophisticated.
What advice would you give to make a fact-checking application more accessible in places where freedom or access to the internet might be limited?
Fact checking application more. I don't know. Use it through a popular encrypted app like Signal or Telegram or Tor or something like that. I'm not sure.
So I was just reading an article in Wired about a woman who was fired from Google's ethical AI team for not. Yeah.
Yeah, she's great.
So it does seem like there's this sort of dysfunctional bro culture in the tech industry where it's of silence, where it's like there are these events that happen and it seems like there's clear communicative logic, like it's designed to attract media attention and then the media reports on it and they never interview anyone in a position of authority, and then the company releases some like press release that says we're changing things this way. Do you think that like independent fact checking or any type of any idea, like how might we hold media more accountable to holding the tech giants accountable? Like media seems to be doing a bad job of holding Google and stuff accountable. So is there a way to sort of hold media accountable for being like almost complicit in that like PR sort of cycle? That
I wouldn't say that the media isn't holding tech companies accountable. Like the media is kind of like
a broad term.
Umbrella, right?
Yeah.
I think there are some media outlets that are doing an incredible job of holding tech accountable. I'm thinking of BuzzFeed, and I'm thinking of the Markup. I'm thinking of ProPublica. Washington Post is getting more aggressive. They're like hiring a bunch of people in Silicon Valley to, even though they're owned by Amazon, they are investigating Amazon. It's pretty cool. But this is such a specialized kind of reporting, right? That requires, some pretty advanced technical knowledge. It requires, having a bunch of inside contacts in Facebook, at YouTube, and things like that. that not everybody can do it. So, these tech companies have very, very big PR budgets that can be overwhelming, right? And they have these tactics that are almost intimidating for media that orgs that challenge them. You know, I've experienced it twice when I reported on Facebook and YouTube, right? Um, they have these tactics where they let you talk to somebody like off the record for technical interview only. They don't say anything on the record. And when you report on that, they basically like go public and saying like we've been misinterpreted. We've been misquoted by these irresponsible journalists. Right? It's a strategy they have. It's known. Um, so news organizations without experienced tech reporters will be intimidated by that. It'll work. Nobody wants to admit, that they make a correction, that they made a mistake. It's really embarrassing for news companies. So that is a problem. It's like being outmatched by all this PR muscle. So that's one thing I wanted to address. I don't think the media, by and large, is not holding them accountable. What could help hold them accountable is, like I said, they just have more specialized, skilled, aggressive reporters that keep hammering away at this. Like, talk to insiders who get leaks, who earn the trust of insiders to get these leaks, and that takes time. It's hard to do.
Do you have any other views on how it might what might help or
what might help hold tech companies more accountable?
Yeah, or help media report on.
Well, help media report on tech companies. More funding to hire more reporters, really.
Okay.
More skilled reporters. That's always the problem. It's news. It's very hard to make money in news these days. If you're talking from a technological point of view, I'm sure there are tools out there that could help. Like CrowdTango is a great tool. It's owned by Facebook, so they can turn it off anytime, and then it becomes hard to keep track on what it's doing. But I can't think of anything else.
So I don't know. Do you think that there's anything is there is the fact that news is entirely dependent on tech companies to most people get their news from Facebook or through a Google search or through very few people buy physical newspapers anymore. Is that dependence influencing, do you think, at all, or is that?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. So people don't pay for news anymore?
No, most news is dependent on tech companies, right? Like people get news from Google or they get news from Facebook or Twitter. They don't, people still buy physical newspapers, but not very much. Is that a factor? And do you think, and how cautious many newsrooms are in reporting on the tech industry?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's true at all. I think it makes news companies very angry that they've become so dependent on these things, right? That as soon as Facebook decides to tweak their newsfeed algorithm, less news shows up, and then news organizations lose a bunch of traffic, right? And they report on it. They say make up your minds, right? you took our audiences from us, and now you keep punishing us every time. Like Facebook, it forces news publishers to do a song and dance for them, so they can keep getting clicks back to their pages. That's infuriating, and I don't think that makes news organizations like cautious not to anger Facebook. I think it makes them more aggressive, aggressive against it.
I think there aren't more news apps that are used by like a bunch of different news organizations together. Like I just saw one for fact checking that I can't remember what it's called, but it like aggregates all different fact checks from like PolitiFact and stuff like that into like a app. But what, like every news organization has its own app, but is there a reason, like why do you think there isn't an app that for like
And that to do what?
Facebook for news? I don't know.
Why don't news organizations get together to create an app that like, you mean
I don't know why that just popped into my head. I don't know why I'm asking.
Aggregates all their content? Well, there have been many apps that aggregate content, right? That you have like all your subscriptions in one place. Oh,
I guess I meant more like a social app. What is your, I guess I'll just ask, what do you hope the media landscape will look like in 20 years from now? What's the best case scenario?
Well, I hope that by then they'll figure out a revenue model that works. Get people to pay for news more. In a convenient way, it might be the iTunes model where you pay, I don't know, a few cents for one article in a very easy way. Platform that is shared among a bunch of publishers, so you need one tool and the money is shared proportionately. I hope that local news is still a thing, because local news is disappearing more and more. Small local newspapers just can't compete with like New York Times, the big guys. That's a problem. Like New York Times is becoming sort of like the Amazon of news, too big to compete against. Yeah, I hope they'll still have money to keep hiring and training journalists, especially young, digital savvy journalists. I hope that there will be a change in leadership, so news bosses who understand the value of technology and tools and data will, be making good strategic decisions for that. That's my hope. I can't tell what it'll actually be like, but that's my hope.